many years. For 335 families that once relied on impure water, there's some hope. A water purification project by Gammadda. Gammadda, for the people, by the people.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Pune.
Hello there, a very good evening. Welcome to another edition of Newsline Live. Sri Lanka is going through a transformative period. We are on the eve of one of the first times in the history of Sri Lanka where an executive president will be resigning from his position. He will be relinquishing his powers. Well, some argue that it's not of his own volition, but because the people ousted him as he did not meet their standards. To discuss these matters and more, we've got with us on our show the chairman of the SJB Youth and the organizer for Veligama for the Samik Jana Balawege, Rehan Jayawickrama. Very good evening, Rehan, and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Shannon. How are you?
Rehan, we saw you at the President's office a few days before the 9th of July Aragola protest that subsequently resulted in the President announcing his resignation. You have been at the forefront of this Aragola. Today, Sri Lanka is in a bit of a precarious situation because of the uncertainty, and some people say that it would have been better if the Aragola didn't go this far, because now the discussions with the IMF have been affected in a certain way, and there is so much political uncertainty in the country.
No, I think now when you talk about the Aragola and when you read about the revolutions that were done by leaders such as Lenin in the past, there are various elements to the Aragola. You will get the educated lot, you will get the people who go to work, who do day-to-day jobs, you will get the fishermen, you will get people from all over the place. But at the same time, you also get an element of people like criminals, people who are convicts, and you know, who are released convicts. And so when you look at the Aragola in total, I mean, I'm not in any way an informed, I have never condoned burning down houses. But then when you look at the difference between what happened on the 9th of May and what happened on the 9th of June, you see that the violence was at a minimum. I'm not saying that there was no violence, but even when you look at the protesters that walked into the president's house, they could have torched that entire place down if they wanted to, because there was absolutely no security personnel who were there to stop it. And even when they were there, they were not stopping anything really. But the way they carried it out was a very Sri Lankan type of Aragola, where they were jumping on beds. And I'm not condoning what happened, but you know, there was an element of how they went about it. But then also at the same time, we saw the Prime Minister's house being burned down. And while that cannot be condoned, you have to also think that there were so many people passing by, and that there was not many people there to begin with at the start, but they were indiscriminately firing tear gas. Then they had you know, beaten up a few of your Newsline, Newsfirst journalists. And I mean, when you see things like that happening, and when you also see that crowd in Gold Face, and when they come back, I mean, it could have been avoided, it could have been handled better. But instead, you know, people have been indiscriminate tear gas, people have been hammered, journalists have been hammered. So there was a retaliation. But again, I'm not saying that I'm condoning it. But like I always say, every action has a equal or opposite reaction. It's a basic law of karma. And I think all this could have been avoided if the President and Prime Minister resigned at the right time, which they still haven't done. The President has still not resigned. He's given his letter supposedly, but the Prime Minister is still hanging on when it's time for him now to go. The people don't want him anymore.
So based on your theory of, you know, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, what do you think the reaction will be like when the Prime Minister does not resign?
I mean, this is going to be a catastrophe. It's going to be something that we as Sri Lankans won't be able to control. Because now the people have had it, and the people don't want people hanging on to power by force. And when you see the amount of, I mean, when you look at the 9th of May, and when you look at the fact that soon after the President was not resigning, the Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa resigned. And if there could have been additional pressure for the next 3 to 4 days, he would have caved in my opinion. I think the President would have resigned. But instead, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, without consulting any of the other opposition parties, now for example, the Samagi Janabalawega is Sri Lanka's largest opposition party. We have 50-something members. He did not consult us. He did not, yes, in Parliament a few times he said that maybe Harsha should be given the finance ministry. But then again, when we said we don't want any ministries, we said then we proposed Harsha to the Public Finance Committee, the Committee on Public Finance.
He wasn't included.
And he still hasn't been appointed. And it has been over now 1.5 to 2 months. So the style of Mr. Wickremesinghe's politics and the fact that he was only thinking about himself in it. Now a lot of people are saying that he is thinking about the country. If he thought about the country, he could have paved the way for a Samagi Janabalawega-led all-party government, which would have had the Sumandirans, which would have had the Harini Amarasuryas at that time. But he didn't allow that to happen. And if he doesn't go by tomorrow, you mark my word, and I guarantee you, my estimate was that there was about 700 to 800,000 people that came to Colombo. You take my word that there will be close to 1 to 2 million people who will come the next time, and the next time may not be peaceful. And that is not going to be scary only to him, because he can easily take a flight and go. But it'll have really bad effects on the politicians, the younger politicians like us even, who are left behind, who have nothing to do with any of this. And it'll be bad for politicians as a whole. We won't have a country to do politics.
So you said that he could easily get a flight and maybe leave the country, but judging by the events that unfolded today, that doesn't seem to be the case. Now we see our leaders, the leaders who promised that they will not let Sri Lankans down, who promised Sri Lankans so much, who promised Sri Lankans prosperity, who promised Sri Lankans, oracle technology, now are scrambling to leave the country.
That again is a very good point, but you have to realize he tried to leave while still being the president of the country, right? You know, if he resigned, I'm sure he would have been allowed to go. There would have been safe passage if he wanted to go. But Basil Rajapaksa is the only Rajapaksa who has resigned at the moment, and Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. But if I'm not mistaken, Prime Minister Mahinda, the former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, is still a member of Parliament.
Yes.
But Basil Rajapaksa completely left, and he still wasn't allowed to leave. I think that's also because the president tried to leave while still being the president. You know, you can't put yourself in self-exile without first resigning. But I have this strong feeling that tomorrow will be his last day, and I think it shouldn't only be his last day. It also should be the last day of the Prime Minister. Otherwise, it's just going to escalate, like I told you.
Rehan, there are also, because there is so much uncertainty in the country, you can't help but acknowledge the fact there is a lot of misinformation and disinformation going around because there is so much uncertainty in the country, and there were messages, unverified messages, mind you, circulating on social media claiming that there could be a situation tomorrow in the country where the president says, since the president is not being allowed to leave the country, or he's not being given access to leave the country, he might come forward and say, you know what, I will not resign until I am allowed to leave the country.
I have a feeling that won't happen. I mean, usually I have very good instincts, not like a sixth sense, but I have sort of instincts, because the way that these things are happening, I think he will resign. But there is something else. If he wants to redeem himself even by a little bit, even by a 0.5%, if he wants to redeem himself, one thing that he can do is, before resigning, he should sack the Prime Minister. He should sack the Prime Minister and make sure that he cannot become acting president. Because this country will go into further turmoil if Mr. Wickremesinghe continues as Prime Minister. So like I said, if anyone is watching this that knows the president, please convey a message that before he goes, or before he officially announces his letter, for him to first fire the Prime Minister, because according to the Constitution, he can fire the Prime Minister based on the fact that the Prime Minister does not control the majority in Parliament. So I hope he does that.
So, I mean, if the Prime Minister is not fired, of course, the Parliament also has the power to, but then that's a long process to bring in a no-confidence motion. I mean, the problem is that this is not a normal situation. Here, every day, every passing day, every 24 hours is bringing about change.
right? It's not a normal scenario where we have a stable government now. Now the people want this government out. The people have spoken. So now what needs to happen is that soon after Mr. Wickramasinghe either resigns or he's fired, and Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa also resigns. Parliament should convene almost immediately, and they should either go for a vote to pick the new president. But when picking this new president, there's something else I want to emphasize here. Everyone said last time that Mr. Sajith Premadasa didn't step up. Now the country is in a worse situation than it was before May 9th.
Right.
Because the Prime Minister and the President have not done anything to bring in dollars. So now, technically speaking, we are in a bigger mess than what we already are. But soon after he got discharged from hospital, the first message that he gave was, now the SJB is ready to form this all-party interim government. So he has stepped up. So I urge the people in the SLPP as well to rally behind this all-party government, and also to the JVP, to Comrade Androkumara Disanayaka, to Dr. Harani Amarasuriya, TNA ranging from Mr. Sumandiran, then also looking at some of the good guys in the SLFP. I mean, let's all form this all-party government. Let's get all the foreign funding that we can get, or the foreign confidence that we can get to get us out of this mess. And let's go for election in another year, or 6 to 8 months. Let's go for another election. Let's all contest. But what I'm saying is, rally behind the SJB now, because whether we like, I mean, do you remember when Mr. Androkumara Disanayaka said that Ranil Wickramasinghe does not have the mandate of the people because he is only a single member?
Right.
But the JVP also should realize that they only have 3 members. But who has 50 odd members? It's the main opposition of Sri Lanka, which is Samaga Janapala, who is its leader, Sajith Premadasa. So give him the support that he needs, and let's form this all-party government. And like I said, let's go for election. I think politics can wait, but we need election to sort out this mess. We need an all-party government to sort out this mess, so that we can get the fuel, where we can get the dollars in whatever we can, where we can do some serious tax reform, and then we can go for election. Because even though it's a very unpopular government to take, Mr. Premadasa has now stepped up.
Despite the fact that in countries that have experienced situations like this, there have been constant changes in governments. Take Lebanon, for example. There were about 5 governments to come and go,
Egypt.
5 prime ministers to Egypt, Greece. So all of these countries. But I believe one difference in Sri Lanka is the fact that this was a man-made situation, a purely man-made situation, because I remember even the SJB during the past 2 years kept on saying that this is going to be the inevitable reality.
Yes.
And there are some who say that maybe the SJB didn't do enough as the opposition in Parliament to stop this government from whatever that they did.
That is something that I disagree with, and I always tell this to people. The people have to be accountable for the way they vote, right? You can't give a astounding mandate to autocratic government that has failed plenty of times, and then expect roses to come out of it. Right? You can't give your vote and then say, yeah, you know, we did give our vote, but you know,
you should have done better.
You could have done better. It doesn't work that way. We have been given a very low mandate, the SJB. We were only given 50 MPs, and they had and during the general election they received a 2/3 majority. One of the highest majorities ever obtained after J.R. Jayawardena's government in 1977. So the people have to be accountable. The people have to realize that their vote counts. But if they vote in a manner where the politicians will not be held accountable, that's where change has to happen, Shanid. Change has to happen from us. We cannot look at politicians and tell politicians the change has to happen from you all. Because we are the ones who elect them. We are the ones who give them the power. We are the ones who continuously give them power. So let's give it the right way. Let's give it to people who are not tainted with corruption. Let's give it to people who don't have bad track records. Let's give it to the new. Let's give it to the young. Let's give it to people who can do work. It doesn't matter whether you're in the TNA. It doesn't matter whether you're in the JVP. It doesn't matter whether you're in the SLFP or the Pohot Tour or the SJB. Select the best out of the lot. And if that means national governments for the rest of our lives, so be it. But appoint the good ones out there. Don't keep on selecting the same old rotten politicians that have ruined this country from day one. What's the point? I mean, we all knew who Gotabaya Rajapaksa was. We all knew what happened with Keith Noya. We all knew what happened with Pragit Eknalikota. We all knew what happened with Lasantha Wickramatunge. We all knew what happened with the white vans. And what did our people do? Our people made him one of the most powerful presidents of our time. So where is accountability? So change, like I said, has to happen from us. And if it doesn't happen with us, we can say goodbye to this beautiful country.
Well, strong words, Rehan, strong words. Change, of course, seems to be somewhere around the corner, but change is difficult, change is painful. And given the fact that we're facing an economic crisis right now, while the world is also in recession, makes matters only worse. There will be many of us who suffer, there will be some of us who suffer more than others, but this change or this rupture in the political system was in the making, and we would have had to face it somewhere during our lifetimes based on the way that the system was going. Tomorrow, of course, is a special day where the person that you said was elected as the most powerful executive president of the time, given the powers he was vested with under the 20th Amendment to the Constitution, also with a command over a two-thirds majority in Parliament. The provincial councils, when they were active, there was a majority for the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna and all the local government bodies as well. But this president will resign tomorrow, and tomorrow there have been celebrations, I believe, planned at the Gotabaya protest site because they protested for almost close to 900 days to get this win or get this change for the country. But will it be safe? We'll continue this discussion after a short commercial break. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Newsline Live.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Where is the president? Basil Rajapaksa's attempt to fly overseas. What is the future of Gotabaya?
ඔබලා දැන් ඉදිරිපත් කරපු මේ යෝජනා 100%ක් අපි එකඟ වෙනවා.
ජනාධිපතිවරයා ඉල්ලා අස්වෙනවත් එක්කම මේ රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහගේ ඉල්ලා අස්වීමේ ලිපිය ලබා ගැනීමේ වැඩපිළිවෙලක් අද මෙතනින් අපි ආරම්භ කරන්න ඕනෙමයි.
Fuel shortage leaves kidney patients helpless. What happened to the money found at the president's house? Clash at Temple Trees.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsline Live. We're in discussion with Rehan Jayawickrama from the Samagi Janapala. He's the chairman of the SJB Youth. Rehan, we were speaking about what will possibly happen tomorrow with the president who has announced his resignation. But for all intended purposes, we still don't know what will happen tomorrow. Will the president resign? But based on the assumption that the president will resign and there will be certain events organized at the Gotabaya protest site to commemorate this historic victory for the people at the Aragola, do you think matters will go smoothly tomorrow?
Like I said, it all depends on two things. Number one, the president has to resign and it will be a big celebration. But that celebration could easily turn into something much, much different if Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe is appointed as the acting president. You will see it going south very, very, very soon. Because this will be the first time in the history, I think world history, where a person who was not elected, who came in through the national list, not only became the prime minister of the country, but also became its executive president. So all that is not going to go down well with the people. So like I said, it all depends on two things. Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa has to go, and concurrently, the prime minister also has to go. There will be no negotiations there because the crowd represented the Aragola have already said that it's not only Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, that even Mr. Wickremesinghe must go.
But the chairman of the UNP came and said that they want to act according to the constitution and that it will be a violation for the prime minister to resign and that he really can't resign from his position. Subsequently, the Prime Minister went and issued a flurry of statements, actually 3 to be exact, detailing that he will resign and at what time will he resign, when an interim government is appointed, I believe was the time that was specified, but no specific date per se. So by default, if the President does be true to his word and resign tomorrow, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe will be the acting President.
About the chairman is it Vajira?
Yes.
No, so I think he needs to go and get his head checked or something, because they are talking about, you know, all this without even having a mandate. When Mr. Wickremesinghe got 2,000 odd votes, how can you talk? There is no moral standing for them to even no leg to stand on. So they should just stop making these silly comments, because every single silly comment they are making is going to get the people more and more angry with them. What must happen is that if Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe does resign along with Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the Speaker will be immediately appointed as the acting president. So that's fine, because the Speaker becoming the acting president is fine, because the party leaders have already decided that by the they are going to invoke the, I can't remember which article it was in the constitution, but they are going to Parliament is going to convene on the 15th. Nominations for the post of president will be called on the 18th, and 20th will be the vote.
Right.
So let that process continue. But for that process to continue, let both of these so-called leaders go together. You know, they created this unholy alliance or this unholy marriage together. So might as well, you know, end it tomorrow itself, because the next time you have to understand also, Shalan, that 800,000 people came to Colombo with no fuel. They came without any transport.
They came walking.
They came walking. So imagine when the entire country comes to Colombo. This is not something we can handle right now. This is not something that the country can go through right now. So I'm saying, think, for God's sake, think about the people of this country. Think about the millions of people that appointed you. Think about the millions of people who wanted you in power. And now those people want you out. So go out. Because it can't be that hard. If we see it happening in England, if we see Mr. Boris Johnson resigning over having a COVID party, right? And that is after receiving a thumping majority that, you know, England has not seen in the recent history. And they still went. So why is it so difficult for these 70-year-old, 74-year-old elderly gentlemen to now leave and give it to people who are younger?
But Rehan, on the off chance that the Prime Minister does not resign and is appointed as the acting President, he will only hold that position for a matter of days. Is this that bad?
I think, like I told you, every hour will be different. If that, I told you before that 24 hours is now changing. If Mr. Wickremesinghe continues, every hour there will be agitations in this country. Every hour there will be people going onto the street. Every hour you will get people, a cross set of community getting involved in, you know, anarchist type of behavior. And IMF negotiations are going on. And how are they going to react to all this? If they see the fact that 2 leaders who are despised and who the people have resoundingly rejected, when you see them still hanging on, what are foreign nations going to think of us?
So also tomorrow, since the President will be resigning, there is still no specific date announced as to the resignation of the Prime Minister. As far as the interim government structure or the discussions that are going on, who are the prospects that you believe
what I heard as of today is that no matter what the circumstances are, no matter who throws themselves in the hat, that the leader of the SJB, Mr. Sajith Premadasa, is still going ahead. Because we don't want the country to see us as a party that is not stepping up. And we have stepped up. But then another thing that we heard now is that a certain candidate from the Pohot tour also wants the presidency.
Right.
But in which moral capacity does a person from the Pohot tour want it? Because it's a failed party, right? So my view is that if at all we can't reach a consensus, that Mr. Sajith Premadasa should be the president of the country, and someone from any other party can be the prime minister. But you know, and that's another thing. What matters is not even now Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Ranil Wickremesinghe resign. The next thing the people are going to look at is who is going to be the next all-party government in Sri Lanka. And if a Pohot tour candidate goes ahead and becomes president, that is going to cause another wave of riots in the country or demonstrations in the country. So I'm asking the Pohottuwa leadership as well. Now enough is enough. You all will have your time during the next election. You all will have your time during the next year. Right now, give it to the opposition, give it to the SJB, give it to the TNA, give it to the JVP, and get away now. Go away and come back at the next election if you all think you all have a decent majority, if you all think that you all have a decent way of winning the next elections. Come back during the next elections. But for God's sake, now go. Enough.
So, do you think that this sentiments will echo among the members of parliament who are from the Pohottuwa, a majority are from the Pohottuwa? Any thinking in that way?
Any Pohottuwa MP that does not support the country at this stage will have to forget about politics. No matter how popular you are or how popular you think you are, you will be sent off packing home at the next election.
Rehan, we've got some questions from a few of our viewers. Can these leaders, including Ranil Wickremesinghe and Gotabaya Rajapaksa, be trusted to keep their word? They've said that they will resign, but can they be trusted?
The funny thing is, at this juncture, I trust Gotabaya Rajapaksa more than Ranil Wickremesinghe. I think Gotabaya Rajapaksa will go tomorrow. But the same cannot be said about Mr. Clean, no? He said what he called himself, yeah, Mr. Central Bank Clean. So I doubt he will, I doubt that unless he is fired, he will resign. So, well, the president does have the power to remove him from office. Has this been discussed with the president? We're not sure of his whereabouts. I don't know where his whereabouts are.
Contemplated?
But like I told you, the only way that he can redeem himself is if he fires Mr. Wickremesinghe while he's going out.
Right.
He'll have at least a little bit or more respect from the Sri Lankan public.
So for any Sri Lankans who are maybe thinking of coming to the Gotagogama site tomorrow, because there are daily people who are rallying at that location, what would be your advice on what to expect?
Exercise extreme caution. Make sure that you all are safe. Make sure you all have enough liquids to keep yourself dehydrated, because there'll be a lot of people
who hydrated.
Sorry, hydrated. You know, make sure that you all are going to be safe while doing all this, and especially if you're coming with little children. There may be even more people than that there was during the 9th of June. So just make sure that you all constantly watch out and be safe. That's the most important thing. Be safe.
Rehan, we have another question. Would you be in a position to maybe ask the president to do what you asked him to do? Ask Ranil Wickremesinghe to resign?
No. So if there is anyone here who knows the president, or who closely associates the president, or who has any sort of line to him, my humble wish is to please ask Mr. Wickremesinghe to resign. And if he is not resigning, dear Mr. President, please kick him out.
And we were speaking about how protests get violent, and there is only so much that authorities can do when they urge the protesters not to get violent. When the leaders of our country are acting so irresponsibly, how else would you expect people to react?
I think all sorts of violence, it's like what I told you, every reaction has opposite, every action has equal and opposite reaction. So all this will again, Sharin, depend on if and when these two leaders step down. And I can assure you that if they do step down, and if an all-party government is formed, and once the fuel lines and all these things are stopped, or if one of these problems are sorted, I have a feeling the people of this country will not get on the street. They might give the interim government at least a year. And but for that to happen, like I told you, it has to be a good all-party interim government. It can't be the same set of rogues. It can't be the same set of thieves. It has to be a new team. It has to be a team that Sri Lanka has not seen before. And I really hope that all political parties will come together and think of Sri Lanka. Because right now we have to think of Sri Lanka, because this is the last chance we got.
There were statements that were quite interesting that were made or circulating on social media, where people were asking for a president and a prime minister who can walk from the presidential secretariat to the president's house without getting assaulted by anyone. That is the level that is the level that the office of president in Sri Lanka and the office of prime minister has fallen to, which is quite sad, honestly, because that is all that the people expect. A person who could walk from the president's office to the president's residence without getting hammered. Of course, we would need a little bit more than that to get out of this current crisis, but the people know who the leaders that they want are. The parliament, I'm pretty sure, knows who the leaders, the people would want in power for the interim government. We only hope and pray that all parliamentarians, all leaders that we elected and sent to parliament will do right by the country, at the very least at this juncture of time. Thank you very much, Rehan, for joining us on our show. Thank you very much to all our viewers out there for tuning in. Of course, during these days, do take care and stay safe. God bless.